Well, hello everybody. I don't look like Paige.
Hi everyone, it's really me.
It is really Paige. My name's Matt Church, and I have the pleasure of hosting this surgery. Thank you. Welcome, welcome. We love cameras on, as we like to look at you in gallery view. So please join us if you like as we groove out to Dua Lipa and let one or two people join us.
No matter what's written, we can start all over again, all over again. Oh, how can I get
All right. Well, good morning. At the top of this, I said my name's Matt, and it's my absolute pleasure to be a guest host here at the Leaders Surgery. Who's been to a surgery before? Give me a little show of hands. Well, then you know that what we all get to do is we get to go, hello, Paige, you're amazing. I've got a question, and this is the problem that's working in my world. But today we're flipping the tables because I don't know if you've heard, there's this book. There's this book that has come out. I got a little video going, this is the book. I know that each of us are going to be getting a copy. I managed to get one early from Dr. Paige Williams. This is the Leaders Ecosystem. Paige, what book number is this?
It's my fourth solo book. You're hilarious. And I've done two collaboratively. So this is 5.5 books because one of them was the mini book that was just a passion project. So yeah,
So
who
what
knew
we're going to
that was
do,
possible?
what we're going to do in the surgery today is we're going to turn the table. I'm going to ask Dr. Page to talk a little bit about the book. Quick disclosure, I do have a crush on Page, so I'm going to keep that a little bit professional as I rock and roll. But nonetheless, if you pick that up, you'll understand why. And this is an exceptional book. Now, Paige, before I even sort of start to direct in on questions at all, what do you feel about this book?
I was talking with someone earlier and I was explaining it was book launch day today. And I said, yeah, it's my third solo book. And I know you're not meant to have favorite children, but this is my favorite book. Shh, don't tell the others. And I think the reason it's my favorite book, not just because it's the most recent one, is because it's the one where I felt least constrained by what a good book looks like.
Yeah.
And it's the one that speaks most directly to how I want to share stuff with the world.
What's really interesting with this book, and I love it, is it's 9 essays. And having seen your body of work, is each chapter is an essay focusing on a different issue for a leader. And it's almost, there's like heaps of detail in each chapter, but they're beautifully brief and easy to read. So you want to talk a little bit about the decision, rather than 40,000 words building one critical line of argument through, why has this book like danced around these 9 essays? And what was the purpose of that for your reader?
Well, I reckon leaders have got a lot going on right now. We're living and working in contexts that are changing. There's a lot of challenges. There's equally a lot of opportunities. And none of us have the opportunity to kind of press pause on life while I just go and do a deep dive into this, because I think it might really help me, because nothing stops long enough for us to do a deep dive. So for me, these essays are everything a leader needs and nothing they don't, in order to make the most of the opportunities and meet the challenges that they're facing day to day.
That like heuristic, everything you need and nothing you don't, I know guides pretty much your life, which is you're very practically efficient. Like, would I say ruthless? But there's a sense of let's do the things that matter and let's not get distracted by the things that don't. And I think this book does a beautiful job of respecting a leader's time and a leader's context. Now, having looked at your body of work, I know obviously that Becoming Anti-Fragile was a great sort of initial piece. And I think what you were trying to do with this book was redefine the idea of resilience and to give people a sense of like how to bring that conversation up to date. So it feels to me like the book is anchored, like chapter 1, if you like, of the 9 essays. The first essay is essentially Becoming Anti-Fragile, which then flows into your second self-published, like solo published book, Own It, which is all about accountability frameworks. And I really love that forms a backbone of those 2 published books sitting each as essays. So if you haven't read those, the chapters that refer them are almost like the crib notes or the study
Yeah.
notes. And I loved that, because it means what it said to me is you've probably got at least 7 other books if you wanted to. 'Cause each essay could spin out into a book. But do you want to talk to the fact that like it's a whole book summarized in an essay, or the through line of like how the ecosystem works? Really want to get onto the surveys in a minute as well, and how they help us figure out which essays to read in what order if we wanted to.
Yeah, well, the ecosystem does have an organizing framework to it. And so since I first started working in the leadership space, there have been 3 things that my work is about. And it's about feeling well, doing well, and leading well. And so if you take each of those as a theme in the ecosystem, each of those 3 themes, feel well, do well, lead well, can be applied at different levels. So they can be applied to each of us individually. Are we feeling well? Are we performing well? Are we sustaining high performance? Are we showing up in the world? Are we leading ourselves well as we go about what's asked of us day to day? So that's the first level individually. Each of those themes, feel well, do well, lead well, can be applied at the group level. So at the we, so whether that's a team in the workplace, whether it's a family, or whether it's just you and I as a leader follower dynamic. And so that's a level for each of the feel well, do well, lead well. And then finally, there's the collective level. So us. So me, individual, we, group, us, collective, and whether that is an organization, a division, a community, or the world at large, these themes, that each of these 3 themes are addressed through each of those 3 levels. And that's how we get to kind of 9 by 3, 9 essays, looking at those 3 themes at those 3 levels.
It's an extraordinary body of work. It's a little intimidating, to be honest, because you look at it and you go, that has such breadth and such depth. But even if we just pick up that journey of pronouns, I know those of us, and it's all of us here, who are interested in leadership development in one way or another. It's sort of like emerging leaders, existing leaders, and then like eldering leaders. There's like this journey they go through. And that seems to me the journey of pronouns that you're pushing on, like the personal, possessive, I, me, mine, through into the subject object of you and other, into the collection of us. And that speaks to, managing, leading, and culture, and the dynamic between those. It's really cool. Hey, the word exceptional seems to have popped up on all your stuff lately. And I'm really interested in that choice of word. I love the power of language, and I know you're such an intentional person with around your language. What does exceptional mean, and why are you pushing the boat out on exceptional in a world maybe where that's not a comfortable phrase or a comfortable word?
Yes, yeah, I agree. And you're right, it was very deliberately chosen for 2 reasons. One is that I really believe that what got us here won't get us there. So what we've been told good leadership looks like, even what's being taught in business schools right now, today, what's going on in the majority of business schools around the world is not what we need to lead into today and the future that we're facing. So one reason that we need to be exceptional is because we need to go outside the norm. We need to be the exception to the norm, because what good leadership looks like, the norm of it simply isn't enough anymore. And the other thing is that to be an exceptional leader is for us to go, no, I'm not going to just accept what's okay. I'm going to seek to be the best I can be in this moment, in this leadership moment, and in this leadership possibility. And so both of those sides of the word exceptional speak to what I hope this book supports leaders to be and do in the world.
One of the things I've loved from like your first published work, or even your PhD, I had the opportunity to read your manuscript from that about your inside out process, is you're a deep systems thinker, and you're interested in not just the meta view of a system, but the practical things people can do. And when I look at the book and I see that each chapter has like an origin question, each chapter has a heuristic that's driving it, which becomes like a mantra or like a 1-sentence summary of all the principles in it. I see the practical application. I'm interested in, as an org psych, and systems thinking, you've been inspired by so many great people, and you talk in one of the essays about Mary Parker Follett. And I thought that might be a nice story to unpack and sort of evoke into this moment as well.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. I mean, she's such a hero of mine. She lived at the turn of the century. She's known as kind of the grandmother of management consulting. She held some beautiful positions studying leadership first and foremost, and then really worked in the community space in creating community centers in the US. She was living in a same gender relationship at that time, at the turn of
Yeah,
the
so this is
1800s.
what, she's born 1850, right?
Yeah,
And she
right. So
died
this
like
is
1910.
yeah, so late 1800s. So she's living in a same gender relationship. She was an advisor to Theodore Roosevelt. And one of the aspects of like amazing thinking around leadership is this idea of partnering. And she made really explicit how important it is to be aware of the power dynamics when we are in a leadership relationship with others. And look, I say leadership relationship, and yet actually it's not really about that. Any relationship that we're involved in has a power dynamic. It's just whether we're really aware of how we're affecting it, how we're responding to it, and how we might want to influence it. And so a big part of the partnering essay in the book is around shifting the dynamic in our relationships, and explicitly leadership relationships, from being power over, where we do things to people or we do things for them, we like micromanage them, to being with them. So we're kind of really alongside and being not necessarily equals in that we're doing the same thing, but we are with people in the relationship that we have with them.
I know your dear friend, Dr. Michelle McQuaid, and you, like two of the greatest thinkers in org and performance in the country. You put together this book called Your Leadership Blueprint, which was talking about the psychological safety frameworks and some of the regulation in Australia and how we adopt that. But what I've loved about it, particularly from your point of view, and I've seen it from Becoming Anti-Fragile, is it's about practical application. Like, what can I do? I remember once having an accountability conversation with you as like a leader myself, and wanting to have an accountability conversation with someone, and you framed it with me. You said accountability is an act of love, and I found that quite profound, because you were saying only people who care about you will ask like more of you, and you said it way more elegantly than me, but I thought maybe because accountability seems to be the essay that sits at the center of all of this, and everything seems to move around it. I'm wondering if you could talk about the relationship of accountability at the center of the 9 essays.
Yeah, what it is, it's kind of the spoke of the wheel, if you like. And because without accountability, nothing sticks. Like, you can read the other essays, you can understand them, you can love the heuristic and the guiding thinking scaffold that goes with each of them. But unless you're actually willing to go, okay, so what's mine to own in this? What expectations am I going to set for myself? What am I going to invite others into in terms of this situation, or in terms of supporting me, knowing that it can only ever be an invitation. Like, this honoring of sovereignty and making a clear and compelling case for accountability, but knowing we can never force anyone to take action is kind of, it speaks to partnering, it speaks to honor, and it speaks to this place for accountability of coming from love. Like, the way I phrase it is, I see the greatness in you, you can play a bigger game, and I'm here to support you do that. So when we lead accountability from that kind of integrity and truth and love, it's a pretty compelling proposition for people to get on board with.
What I love about that, and we should almost play language bingo, where I'm about to say paradigm shift, and I almost apologize in advance to everybody for doing it. It's almost like pivot. Don't say pivot and don't say paradigm, or I'll come over the camera and get you. But I think the fundamental paradigm shift of accountability is making you do things you don't want to do because you didn't do the things you should do, and it's an integrity issue on you, which is the way most or many may choose to see it. And seeing it reframed as I'm inviting, the best of each of us together into this moment, I think is really, really beautiful. I want you to pick a favorite child of your 9 essays. So this is almost impossible, I know, because
it's not.
Oh.
Sorry, other kids.
Okay. All right.
Number 9.
Close your ears. Number 9.
Number 9. It's Unbound, leading Unbound. Yeah. Yeah.
What question is leading Unbound sort of asking of us? It's like that. I think it's what you just said, right? Can I hold a bigger space? It's that whole idea of expansion.
It is. It's am I prepared to put things down that no longer serve me and that I don't have to hold as true? Yeah.
You sort of frame 3 words around that essay. which I really loved because I don't, does anybody else on the call here have oppositional defiance disorder, self-diagnosed? I'm like, don't tell me what to do. The minute you tell me what to do, even if it's good for me, I'll do the exact opposite. So, but you put 3 words up at the front. Well, the first one was expectation.
Yeah.
Second one was obligation.
Yeah.
And the third one was resentment. And that they, in your mind, were the definition of what a bound life would be. And I was thinking about high potentials and talent when I was reading that. And I was thinking about the whole idea of how do we attract, develop and retain really talented people like high potentials. And it seemed to me it's this tight loose that the 9th essay talks about. It's this idea of like, how can I be unbounded within a system? I've heard you often talk about, you know, you love Donella Meadows and others as systems thinkers, and talking about, I get it's not hers. I can't remember who it was you introduced me to, who talked about islands of
Margaret Wheatley, Meg Wheatley,
Meg
Islands of
Wheatley.
Sanity. Yeah.
Because what it feels like to me is, and you use this phrase ghost in a machine, and it feels to me like a high potential, like the few, the exceptional, are ghosts in machines. They don't complain about the system they're in. They operate exceptionally within it. And I feel like when I read the whole book and I'm trying to get to where's it heading to, it seems like it's heading to that. And I didn't want to put words in your mouth, but what's coming up for you as I sort of highlight that?
So I think that it is I know that it is a journey through the ecosystem, and it's not necessarily a 1 to 9 journey. And yet for me, as I wrote the essays, it felt like 9 was a culmination of the journey of the previous 8 in whatever order a person may read them or need them. And yet by reading and getting to Unbound, to leading Unbound, we've kind of got all of the things that we might place in our way or that we might perceive are in our way out. And we can be working in a system that is dysfunctional, that is toxic, and we can still be true and honoring who we are and being the most effective and exceptional leader we can be. We can't always fix a system, and unbinding ourselves from that expectation and that resentment or feeling a need to do that as a leader is where the freedom comes, because we're able to operate in a much bigger, clearer, more impactful space when we've put that stuff down. And so Unbound is in the kind of leading into the world kind of aspect of the ecosystem, because it's about leading from the truth of who you are with resonance into the world, having put down the stuff that might tie you down or hold you back. And really the other 8 essays help you get to that spot.
I see that. And I can almost see, like, if there were a third, like a 700th book to write, it would be the Unbound one, because it feels to me this is like the Lead Yourself one, you know, becoming anti-fragile. It feels to me like this is the Lead Others one, which is the accountability ownership one. And that where the ecosystem ends up is it ends up in this idea of Unbound with agency, sovereignty. And it's like, it's a clear like trajectory of lead self, lead other, lead the world, you know, lead your world. Somehow, I don't know how you do it. And I think it's probably Nikki. That's how you do it. Like, because Nikki's on this call.
My beautiful business manager. Yes, she's amazing.
So you just decided to drop this one out in the middle of getting, you know, the ecosystem done. So this is, let me focus it off my face. This is a book that's sort of, what does good look like?
Yeah.
And you know, everything you need and nothing you don't. Anybody who spends any time with you kind of gets that that's not only who you are, but you're going to hear that every day. But the other thing people are going to hear every day is this is almost like the Tao of Dr. Page is to ask the question, what does good look like? And you even open up this book, like in the sort of manifesto, it feels like, not an introduction, in the call to arms, where you're sort of going, asking the question, what does good look like at work, at home? What does good look like for my customer? What does it look like for my team? What does it, you know, what are we measuring is like, what does good look like? It seems like an overarching heuristic. What's the relationship between this book and this book?
Well, I reckon what does good look like is the anchoring question for leaders. It's and leaders in its most expansive state, like I leader as a parent, leader as a friend, like just leading yourself. What does good look like in this moment, in this conversation, in this meeting, in this quarter, around this dinner table, in this conversation with my young adult? Like, what does good look like? Helps orient us to clarity. It helps orient us towards impactful, effective action. It helps us manage our energy, our attention in a world where there is a high potential for burnout. There's so much talk about burnout. Many people are experiencing it every day as they go about their day to day. And so asking this question helps us go, okay, what is it that is most essential, most impactful for me next? And having the ecosystem as a toolbox, almost as a set of ideas and strategies, means that what we've got is, as we answer the question, what does good look like? We're then able to go, all right, so I'll put a bit of lead with love, and I'll put a bit of anti-fragile, and I'll put a bit of unbound, and I'll come at it from my true self, from my finding true. That's what good looks like for me in this moment. So I set it up as the opening question and invite people to hold it as they're going through the ecosystem, because it's the blending of the ideas in the essays that help us come to a really nuanced, in the moment, agile response that meets the need or the opportunity in front of us.
As a child, I used to enjoy reading. It was for only a year, and then I got sick of them. I got the books that were choose your own adventure. So you get like, and the second chapter, you get to make a decision and jump to chapter 5 or whatever it was. And even though it was a linear book, I felt like I had the freedom to play the book, like to play the game. I realize I haven't done a good job of reporting on, I got the opportunity to get an early preview of the surveys and the assessments. What blew me away was that you've given someone the ability to pick 2 or 3 essays only and read them. And so you've designed a survey, a quiz is the best I can say it, where I get to ask questions of myself and order. This speaks to your research and your academic background, because it's basically a PhD collecting tool, almost like, where do people stand? What are their priorities and preferences? But then it has this extraordinary prescription where it says, read them in this order or only read this, almost as a, what can I do? And I thought that was incredibly generous because most of us are fortunate enough to have written a book or 2. And in the writing of them, you kind of want people to read the whole damn thing, and you want them to read it from beginning to end and top to bottom. And there's a real intellectual humility here where you're going, no, in service to you, read the bit that works for you. So I'm assuming, Nikki and Paige, we've got the ability for people to do the survey somehow. And I imagine people in surgery are going to get communicated on that soon if we haven't already.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, you're right. We can navigate our way through the ecosystem in any way we want to. You can start at essay 6 and then go to 3 and then go to 2, or you can just read 1 and just go, no, that's all I need right now. And so the diagnostic is an invitation to go, what's really current for you? What's live? What's the most pressing need or opportunity? And through a series of declarative statements that kind of state, this is what's going on for me, you get to order them. And then you get a report that says, well, based on what you've just told us, we recommend this journey through the ecosystem. And it gives you the essays in the order of priority that you've decided is what's going on in your world. And each of the statements addresses feel well, do well, lead well at one of the 3 levels of me, we, and us. So it's basically choose your own adventure. And that's at the leadersecosystemsurvey.com. And Nikki's going to put a link into the chat so that you can kind of go to the whole survey platform and see what's going on there.
You talk about the way you've written this book, that it's going to be explicit and clear, and that it's everything you need and nothing you don't. And I think it's very clear in the way you've written it. A lot of effort's been put in by you in advance, so we as readers don't have to. More importantly, we're not just readers, you're writing to leaders, where we get to go, not just as a reader of a book, but as a leader with a context, having to do something into that space. So I also love that you're describing and not prescribing. And this speaks, I think, a little bit to you know, how you help organizations and the like. So let's say I was to pick up a copy of the book, I was to do the survey, I was then to read, you know, as I did that, the essays in the order and was able to apply them. I guess my question is, how does someone get a little bit more Dr. Page in their business?
Well, so in the ethos of the ecosystem, the way I love to work with organizations is with an intention for a long-term engagement, whether that's 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, but a build your own adventure, because things change so quickly in organizational context. And what I found is even when we've kind of planned a 6-month or 12-month program, something will happen. There'll be a buyout or a takeover, or the critical leader will leave, and we'll be there going, well, is that still the right fit? So the way I have found works best with organizations or teams is to do what I call the lift, shift, sustain strategy. So lifting is when we come together and we do kind of a keynotey type, lifting the energy, lifting the perspective. And then we shift by following that with a workshop where we actually apply the ideas to something that's going on in their world, so that it becomes relevant and real in that moment. And then over the next 2 to 4 weeks, we then have accountability coaching conversations, which can be online, so that as we're looking to embed that learning that happened in that lift and shift experience, and as people come up with the speed humps and the friction of going back into the real world, I'm there as a coach alongside them. So that's really the partnering piece as they start to embed it. And then we go, right, what's the next thing that we need to do? And that lift, shift, sustain, and lift, shift, embed is the cycle that we go through, but we build it as we go, so that there's not something that feels really kind of locked in and feels out of whack with actually what's going on in such a fluid and fast way in the context.
I reckon in professional leadership development, that's so smart. I think that the history here is that there's massive proposals with huge interventions that go through committees, and they're out of date the minute you're underway with them. And it's almost like strategy shifted from 5-year plans to quarterly reflections. And it seems to me like this, that speaks of the truth of partnering versus prescribing. You know what I mean? And that idea of describing, not prescribing, I'm not surprised to hear that the way you do business flows on from that. Knowing we're
Absolutely.
coming.
It's always a partnering with,
Yeah.
how is it that what I can bring can be in service to the needs of the team, the leader, or the whole organization.
I'm super aware that I've dominated the time of talking to you, and that there's many here that would like to have a conversation with you, and that the normal surgery is probably that people don't have someone like me standing in the way. So I'm going to gently step back and sort of invite from us as a room to go into dialogue and ask questions of Dr. Page. I just want to sort of close off the interview part by going, it's super impressive. What's impressive is not just the principles, but the architecture of this, and then the consistent application of what does the leader need and only need in this moment. And it feels like an act of service. So on behalf of all leaders who read this and are impacted by your work, thank you, Paige, for all you do. Could we all do a Zoom applause by unmuting yourself and going, bloody good job, congratulations, and other things, because I want to get that on recording.
Well done, Paige. Great job.
Well done.
Yes, it's meant to be a cacophony of us all talking over each other. Go, go, go. That's what I want. Hey, if you would like to put your cameras on, we get that that's not always suitable based on where you are and how you are and things like that. We'd love to invite you to do that. I've switched to gallery view. It's lovely to see everybody here. But you can also use the chat, and I've got the amazing Nikki supporting me as we go through and kind of have conversations. So if you've got a question you'd like to ask Paige, I'm going to invite you to unmute yourself and do so. And the way to do that would be to use the reactions button. You'll see it's now, if you've updated your Zoom, it's a little heart. So you can go down to your panels, hit the reaction button. And the one that would be great is the hand up one. And what the hand up does then cues you as someone with a question to ask of Paige. So just while I give everybody an opportunity to do that, I'm going to ask Paige one more question. Hey, Paige, is there anything else you'd like to say about this book that you haven't said that you think would be super useful for people to know?
I've been a leader, and I know what it's like to have so many demands placed on you and not know if you've got the answers and not know if you've even got the energy to try and find them. And so this is written for that moment. This is written with that moment in mind, to make them easy to digest, to make them easy to apply, but without taking any of your wisdom away. So that's what this book is written for.
Hey, Vashti, your surname Casey, I'm assuming. Have I got that right? Hey, Vashti, you sent in a question beforehand, which I really liked because it gets to the heart of some systemic stuff, right? Like, Vashti, I'll read your question out, but then invite you to unmute and have a conversation with Dr. Page if you wish, Vashti, which is, how do we address toxic leadership strategies when they're, and Vashti goes like bunny ears, she goes, backed by policy. I can almost hear her like, and I'll give Vashti a chance to bring that alive. Where there's sections of documents that are used to justify behavior. Now, Vashti, do you want to speak to that a little bit? Your context sounds, dare I say, public sector.
It's a question around, I have a few questions actually, but that one was around how do you raise the discussions how do you pull it away from the policy, from the procedure, because often if you are in a toxic environment, it hasn't happened automatically. It's happened over time. And what I have observed is that people who would usually not at all be involved in a toxic situation, if they've been involved in it inadvertently for a while, then there is that acceptance, because otherwise I need to address the fact that I have allowed it to occur.
Yeah.
And then it becomes empowered. And there is always a way to find any document, any policy, anything, and take a section of it to back any behavior. It's very easy to do that. How would you address that if that's the way that it's being excused?
So I absolutely hear you. It's like the frog in boiling water, isn't it? Like things slip and all of a sudden we realize, wow, we're a lot further away from the start point than ever we might have wanted to be. And regaining that ground can be challenging because people, as you say, feel on the back foot, or they feel like they are in some way to blame for it. One of the ways that I've addressed this with clients is to invite there to be a conversation around understanding what expectations there are of a group or a team, or within a group or team. And rather than it being a finger pointing exercise, it's almost like an information gathering exercise, so that it invites a conversation whereby expectations that maybe are not formalized or that are not in the policy are able to be spoken about, including what's okay and what's not okay behaviorally. So, it might be, well, I have an expectation. One of my expectations is that we treat each other with respect and courtesy at all times. What does that look like? Well, it means that X, Y, Z. And so it's not that that's necessarily written in a policy, but it invites a conversation. Now, I recognize the challenge with that is that it requires a level of psychological and psychosocial safety. And yet we have to start those conversations somewhere. And often a great way to start them is by asking simply, what do we think is going well in this group? And allowing people to build confidence by talking about that first. And then where do we feel that there are things that expectations perhaps are not aligned, in that we don't have the same expectations as each other or of each other. And so opening up a broader conversation that then allows that to be brought from below the surface to above the surface is one way I've found is effective in tiptoeing into that space. And I recognize it's challenging.
Can I give a shout out to every month Dr. Page opens up the surgery for conversations where the whole hour is dedicated to the issues that leaders that she's worked with or will be working with can come and get greater clarity. So I know that you sort of said, Vashti, that there might be more in there, which is great. I think that's going to be a great time to do that. Just before I jump to Steve, Omakami Bailey sent in a question which I really liked because it spoke to the power over versus partnering with that you sort of called out early. And it was like, what suggestions, tips would you give when interacting with leaders who exhibit more of a command and control vibe, or leadership style was what Amakami said.
Yeah,
Anything come up there?
I think that there's an interesting thing around command and control and tell and ask and invite, which are kind of, if you like, two ends of a spectrum of ways we can lead. And it's not that tell and control is always wrong. There are certainly times where tell and control is absolutely the best way for us to lead, like in emergency situations. And Steve, I know you've been involved in many of those, so I'm interested to see where your question, what your question is going to be. But if you've got someone that's very much in that tell and control, it's coming from a place of not feeling safe to let go. And it can sometimes come across as being micromanaging. And it's this fear of either expectations not being met or of them not being met to the standard or quality. And so once we understand that tell and control often comes from a place of fear, when it's not because there's a requirement in the context that means it's actually the most appropriate way to lead, and we can view it through that lens, how is it we can create safety for that leader that means that they feel less need to tell and control? And that's what that looks like depends on the context, but understand that creating safety around that, reducing the perceived risk for the leader is the way for them to feel safer, to be able to step away from their tell and control, and feel safe in maybe asking and inviting, or just loosening and allowing others to have some more input.
I love that continuum you just, with words painted around. It was basically ask on one side, tell on the other, and obviously the flow in between. And that maps with some of Dr. John Vervaeke's work out of Toronto University around ways of knowing, which I think is super cool. Steve, maybe our final question for this segment, but in no means the least.
Thank you. No, Paige, I'm not going to talk about command and control. I'm actually struck by your comments around Unbound, and a couple of clients recently who look at the ability and confidence and opportunity to step up and play a bigger game, and then ask the question, but isn't that selfish? And I wonder how you would respond to someone that has that as a limiter. Like, so you can use all the rational stuff that you usually do, but that real, like it really keeps them stuck, and it comes down to this thing about selfishness as expressed. So I'm just interested in your response to that.
Yeah, and so through the lens of Unbound, one of the things that keep us most bound are our self-limiting beliefs. And to see that playing a bigger game is playing a selfish game, also has linked to it perhaps that by playing a bigger game, I am somehow reducing the ability of someone else to, or the potential or capacity of someone else to. And yet actually, if we think about what's ours to own, what's ours to own for each of us is to play the biggest game we can and be the best possible impact in the world that only we can be, because only we are who we are with our expertise, our experience, the essence of who we are. That's how being true to that and living the best version of that in the biggest way possible. Wow, imagine if we were all doing that. Imagine if we were all doing that. What a different world we would live in. And so this idea of it being something selfish, it's actually a gift. It's actually in service to the world that we play the bigger game, because the bigger game is, to use the words of Stephen Carr, is an infinite game. It's not about us winning or losing. It's about us continually making a contribution in the best way we can, in service both of ourselves, because we're showing up as our truth in the best way that we can, and in service of impacting the world and beyond. So there's a piece around a limited, what do I want to say? Not an abundant mindset that brings us to selfishness, because there's an either or. If I am this, then it means someone else isn't able to be. And yet actually Unbound speaks to, no, we can all be. we can all be the best version of ourselves if we allow ourselves to be, and understand that we don't need to be to play into the limiting beliefs of ourselves or others.
Thank you.
I love that.
Pleasure. Thanks for the question, Steve.
And I love, Paige, that you slipped in your third heuristic, which is what's ours to own. So there are 3 guiding heuristics that seem to drive all of your work, and I can see them reflected in the ecosystem book. You know, what does good look like? The next one being everything we need and nothing we don't. And the third being what's mine to own and what's not. And I think in those 3 heuristics, you can see like a highlighter or a circle wrapped around, corralled around the 9 essays, and that answer the question, if you only had 1 minute to talk about what leading exceptionally looks like, I imagine it would sit in those 3. You're an inspiration. You are an absolute machine, publishing and getting these things done. I think they're extraordinary bodies of work. And once again, thank you for the privilege to interview you and have this conversation. I'm going to hand back to Paige and Nikki to close things off. But thank you, everybody, for participating so fully. What a joy.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Matt, for taking the time to dive through the ecosystem. The questions, the framing, amazing. And as always, bringing out the best in everyone around you. So thank you so much. If anyone's got any questions that you'd like to cover off one-to-one, I'm happy to stay on the call. But if you're thinking to yourself, well, what next? Then there are 3 things that you can do that would keep us moving in terms of the ecosystem. If you think that you'd like us to work together around some of the ideas that we've talked about today, then just email me direct and we can talk, and that would be amazing. I'd love to see how we could explore lifting, shifting and sustaining any of the ecosystem ideas in your world. If you want to start your own journey, then the Leaders System, the Ecosystem Introduction is a great place to start. We'll include the download to that in an email that follows up this session, and the links to the surveys as well will come in that email. And then finally, you can always just explore more. There's so much more about this on my website. And I have a section called The Hub, where I put the latest leadership research that I'm enjoying and my latest leadership thinking too. And all of those links, again, will come to you in the email to follow up our session today. So thank you so much. I'm always so honored that anyone chooses to come and spend time. But I reckon this is how, as leaders, we support each other to be exceptional. Because there is someone in this room who is having a similar challenge or facing the same opportunity as you are, just in a different context. And the purpose of the surgery is to give you an opportunity to connect so that we as leaders can support and lift ourselves and each other to be exceptional. So thank you so much for joining me today, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.